magazines and all that, you know, you would find that he was someone quite noteworthy. So those are the three people I would say. Cleno Wickham, our cousin, Leslie Scott, aka Zachary Abdullah. If people want to look him up, look this actor up, seeing all of the films he played in. I know some of them off the top of my head, like Porgy and Bess, Island Woman, Colgate Comedy. He was, I mean, in the 50s, and he was a dynamo, man. He, as I said, the only thing that stopped him from being a household name is his politics. You know, he'd be on the Merv Griffin show tonight. I mean, Mike Douglas show, which was big at that time in like mid 1965. Yeah. So, and the brother had migrated here from Cleveland, Ohio. You know, and he was friends with Cab Calloway, all of those guys, but quite a political entity. You know, so those are the three people who I would say are most significantly influenced my father early on, as you asked.
So let me tell you what happened. So before I came here to do this interview, I had not seen the portrait on 125th Street. Yeah. I hadn't seen it yet. I went past it twice, and I was like, I was on the bus. I didn't see it. I said, you know what? I had finished taking care of something. I said, I'm going to see it now before I had to come back. I had to rush back. So I went, I found it. I said, oh, there it is. Bam.
It is. That is.
I'm taking the picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you, I'm taking the picture. So 2 young ladies and a young man walking by. They just walking. I'm taking the picture. I said, hey. I said, black is beautiful. And I look, and I pointed to it, and they were like, they looked at, oh my God. They were like, oh, wow. They stopped, went back around the corner looking at the other
murals. Yeah.
Murals, came back. She had a video camera like this, filming. Young lady. It was 2 young ladies in a gap. I said, look at that.
Yeah, no, that's
I mean, I don't know why I said that to them.
Right,
they
the
walking
spirit.
By, I was just taking a picture, and I just said, "Hey," you know. They looked at me. I said, "Black is beautiful." They looked, and I pointed, and then that was it. Set it off.
Right.
That's a powerful message, man.
That's
a very powerful message.
Mm-hmm.
So what are y'all looking to do with that message? Because that message is dynamic and powerful, and it's a game changer. What are y'all gonna do with that? Black is beautiful.
Well, I can also tell you that right now on 77th Street, Central Park West, there's an exhibit by my uncle. It's called Kwame Brathwaite, Black is Beautiful. It captures more, just like you see that, the mural there, it has the picture of my father surrounded by the other men from AJazz. All of those brothers are AJazz are significant. This brother here, Bob Gums, he's still living. He's responsible for like 5 street namings in the Bronx. He's one of the only Black coin makers. There's only like 5 Black coin makers in the United States. He's one of them. If you saw Herb Boyd's article in the Amsterdam News yesterday that came out, Herb Boyd talked about AJazz, the vanguard of the arts. You know, they were visionary brothers. You know, they you know, what their work, what they did was not only pioneering, but as I said, all of them, bar none, were great men. They did great thing. The other brother right next to Frank Adu Robinson has been in about 50 films. He was a great actor, and he directed the AJazz Repertory Theater. So my father also, what people don't know, was a playwright. He wrote these plays, but this the guy's the director. They doing a documentary on him that's going to be coming out probably 2023. Frank Adu Robinson, a great a great actor and a great director of the arts. If you ever saw Across 110th Street, he was the first brother that they took out. They killed him in that film. But yeah, that's Frank Adua, and he was a male model. So he was part of A-Jazz. Then, of course, that's my father who we're talking about. Then, of course, as I said, that exhibit, which is on 77th Street, my uncle is one of the legendary photographers of the Second Harlem Renaissance, Kwame Brathwaite. And again, there's an exhibit right now and goes into January 23rd at the New York Historical Society with his work in it. But if you remember when we had the Motown Cat theme restaurant here, every photo in there was taken by him. You know, if you check him out, you know, as a photographer, he is, you know, his resume, I mean, outside of Gordon Parks and a few others, you know, I can't think of anybody more notable, you know, with their work. This other brother here on the end, I'm gonna skip and go to this other brother here on the end. That's Chris Hall. Chris Hall, people don't know, he invented he invented Huggy Bean, the black dog. You remember Huggy Bean?
Yeah.
He invented Huggy Bean for Hasbro. He also created the first African superhero 3 years before Black Panther. A superhero used to run in comics called Little Zing. I mean, he wrote.
I think I've seen that around.
He wrote for Miles Davis. He's also wrote. He wrote Bitches Brew for Miles. He did a lot for a number of jazz artists he wrote for. So I'm just mentioning, like, if you see the film about A-Jazz, it talks about the accomplishments of these brothers. You know what I mean? So, and then the other brother here is Giles. That's Leroy Giles. That's Leroy Giles, who's a great actor also. But, you know, my father, as A-Jazz, was involved in every component. So A-Jazz was stood for African Jazz Art Society and Studio. Initially, they were Jazz Art Society, right? Then they changed their name to African Jazz Art Society. And by the time they came to Harlem, then they were African Jazz Art Society and Studio, because they took up a office with a studio. My uncle could develop his pictures and everything right there in Harlem, at the adjacent to the Apollo Theater, where they, you know, the owners of the Apollo were the landlord. So that's when they named, even though they, you know, you'll see on record, even before they got there, that they were calling themselves African Jazz Art Society and Studio. Officially, they didn't start paying rent in Harlem till like 60, 61. But the formative years, they were in the Bronx with keeping jazz as an African art form and having these concerts at Club 845, bringing in Cannonball Adderleys, you know what I mean? Bringing in the first time where you see in George Brath. If you go to the 62nd Street, you see that jazz artist in there with, he's the only jazz artist with a mural in the New York City train station. And his name is George Brath. He was performing for A-Jazz, you know what I mean? Jimmy Owens, an NEA jazz master. That's like the Hall of Fame for jazz artists. He's performing there. So all of these artists who kicked off in jazz and got their careers pumped off, they was coming through A-Jazz, you know. Abby Lincoln and Max Roach were a huge part. That's how A-Jazz started to spread to the Midwest. You know what I mean? Abby's going out there, even though she's a mega star, you know what I mean? She's doing Hollywood, she's doing Nothing But a Man, you know, and these things. Max Roach, probably the greatest jazz drummer of all time. Exactly, you know, legend. This was the power couple before these more contemporary power couples, you know what I mean? Miles Davis never performed at an A-Jazz because he was under contract, but his quartet played at A-Jazz functions, you know what I mean? And Miles helped later on with the financing of A-Jazz. So there's a lot of support in the jazz world, you know what I mean? With the creative community, you know, A-Jazz is the pioneers of not just the Black is Beautiful movement, but the Black arts movement in itself. A lot of times when people look up Black arts movement, it's going to allude to 1965 and all that. No, because that was just a name. But everything that made up the Black arts movement, AJAZ had already been putting down 5 years before that. Okay. So AJAZ, when the record is corrected eventually and the rest of the world catch up, they'll understand AJAZ. They see AJAZ as the pioneers to kick it off, but no, they're actually the pioneers and the founders of the Black arts movement, not just the Black is Beautiful movement. They had the AJAZ griots, the spoken word, to pull magazines out, So my father did spoken word. The brother Chris Hall did spoken word. They was appearing in the Black magazines of the era. You know what I mean? Then you had the AJAZ.
Did your father know Barbara Antier?
Huh?
Did he know Barbara Antier from the National? Did he know Barbara Antier from the National Black Theater?
Yes, definitely, definitely. So all of these people, AJAZ had put, as I said, AJAZ Repertory Theater. They had their plays. They were doing this. Then, of course, they had the AJAZ griots, the AJAZ Repertory Theater. Then, of course, when they brought in them sisters, the models, the Grandassa models, Black's Beautiful movement went viral. That's when you start seeing all these sisters on these album covers with the natural hair, with the curves. There's people we were moving away from that European model, that Twiggy model coming out of the UK, bringing what the brothers like. We want our women with some curvature. That's what AJAZ did, introduce the African aesthetic that we really appreciated. We were not, but at the time, so physically that's what they wanted, but we didn't even realize how much we loved women, seeing our Black women in a natural state, because in the 50s, even the Black men was having their hair processed. So AJAZ brought on a modeling troupe of women who were wearing their hair natural. If you remember who the brother who was the Minister of Information for the Black Panthers, he came along when he was blown out of this world, Eldridge Cleaver. Before he wrote that little silly book, Soul on Ice, where he was disrespecting Black women, he was talking about Black women, and he was talking about them like as an amazing, most beautiful creatures on earth, he would say, because he saw what he said he never thought he could, he never had these feelings about Black women until he saw the Grandassa models. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever read that book, Soul on Ice, but it's not very complimentary to, but you gotta recognize who Eldridge, even though he was a Black Panther and the Minister of Communication, then they're not flattering things or attitudes he had toward our sisters. But even in our community, because it hadn't been done before, many people came to that first AJAZ Naturally show. That's what they would call. After the initial one, Naturally 62, then it'd be like Naturally 63 or whatever. But then, they would have these Naturally events, more than one. But these shows, they might travel to other places. Again, you got to remember, Abby Lincoln is like, she's the one doing all the media with my father. You have pictures of them. They the ones on these radio shows and all this talking about the Grandassa models. They going here and there. She's the one sitting down with maybe the Nation of Islam, who had Muhammad Speaks paper, highlighting the Grandassa models. All of these stuff in the community. Abby Lincoln and Max Roach, who jazz, you got to understand, at that time was like rap is now. So jazz was it. Jazz was what everybody was. If you was cool, you was into jazz. You was on a jazz scene. You was at jazz clubs. You wanted to be around jazz artists. They was the cool kids. Right. You know what I mean? So it was a different environment. It was a different setting. So
Coltrane and all of that.
Yeah, and so, AJAZ, this was 66 years ago. I'm not born, you're not born. A lot of people, and our listening audience probably wasn't born yet. But AJAZ was founded in August of 1956. We in 2022. And as I said, right now there's been a delay. There's a councilman in the Bronx. His name is Rafael Salamanca. And for reasons we won't go into now, he has been holding up the street naming to honor Ajaz and its historical relevance. Because,
okay,
you know, I won't go into it right now because there's some things going on, but some people could probably guess what the reason is. You know, that
right.
he's holding up on that. But, you know, it appears like you know, he's doing a disservice to all the residents of that area when they should be able to look up and see this historic organization, you know what I mean? And what they did. So, you know, when we look at my father, I think if we look at some of the highlights of Elambe Brath, outside of being the visionary behind the African Jazz Art Society and what they did with creating the Black is Beautiful movement based on the tenets of Marcus Garvey that were imparted to them by the Honorable Carlos Cooks, you know, creating a Black is Beautiful movement, creating the Black, pioneering the Black arts movement, okay? Before any other organization. There was no organization before Ajaz, you know, that was doing, in the Black arts, doing all that they were doing in terms of plays, poetry. There was nobody else doing what Ajaz doing. No other organization before them. When we look up and we start to define what the Black arts movement is, using the nationalism, okay, the politics, the Black theater and the Black spoken word, who is it? Ajaz was the first. Ajaz pioneered and founded, is what I'm saying, the Black arts movement. It didn't start in those 65, it started before that. They already had a ground, they already laid the blueprint to come behind Ajaz. One thing that happened with Ajaz, my father got more interested in international affairs, freedom and liberation in Africa. Any people see, if you go to 125th Street, those four corners of the state office building, they say African Square right now. But my father told Percy Sutton to rename the street when Percy Sutton was the borough president. Those four corners used to say African Liberation Square. That's what he used to say. I got the photo still with my father and Percy Sutton on a ladder, okay? And Percy Sutton wasn't necessarily all, you know, understanding what the importance of African Liberation Square was, but that was as I said, my father who was going to later found Patrice Lumumba Coalition, and, you know, his connections with all these African leaders. You know what I mean? If we look to Guinea, their president, Sekou Touré, gave him the Côte de Chivalry. Côte de Chivalry is an award. It's the highest honor. It's a little bit higher than what we call the Purple Heart here. And it's the highest award a non-citizen of Guinea can get. So the president of Guinea, Sekou Touré, had honored him with this award, you know? And so he had been doing this where people were knowing him for his African internationalism. So his focus was no longer just on what was going on here, but getting freedom for African countries that were still colonized, getting these leaders also in touch with each other so they could start talking, you know, and what they could start doing, chronicling the history, you know what I mean? Because a lot of time these leaders are in the movement, they don't have time to document. Father was the document in these things. So my father told Percy Sutton, we got to get the lay people, when they come past here on 125th Street, when they look up, they're going to wonder, what's African Liberation Square? Why is that name? You know, and it would go along with it, you know? And so my father would always, even before, people might remember, he was always writing stuff for the Amsterdam News, but my father would also write for all of the Black papers, Daily Challenge, Our Time Press. As I said, you know, he used to, the Citizen Call was another Black paper at the time, where he was a regular columnist, you know what I mean? So, and he would work his information into these papers. He would set, you know, the stage and the seed. You know, even when we didn't have Black news radio, you know, we got the pictures where the former general manager of WBAI, his name is Bernard White, for the Pacifica station, he tells the story about how my father convinced Percy Sutton to buy these Black radio stations. He had the money, and it was there, you know, if you get the book, the essay book, well, the essay book, of course, is out of print right now. It was my father who convinced Percy Sutton to buy these black stations, you know, Bernard White, who, again, general manager of the progressive station Pacifica, tells that story in the book of you have the Elambe Brath essay book. If you look in the early part, he tells that story, you know.
Now, also, I understand that he played a major role in bringing the legendary, the great Nelson Mandela to Harlem. Not only Harlem, but to 125th Street, one of the most famous streets in the world. Talk about
because as I said, well, there's another thing. My father used to be on South African TV so much. A lot of people like he's South African. That name, you know, they thought Elambe, maybe is that a South African name? You know, a lot of times there was a lot of people, you know, South Africans United, they're nonprofit here now. They said, you know, a lot of them said, we thought he used to be on our TV airways over there so much, we thought that he was South African. You know, we did not realize that this was a brother from the United States on our TV ways telling us about our movement here in South Africa. So it was kind of only right, you know, he was a leading person for the divest movement here against apartheid, you know. In fact, you know, we mentioned Lou Donaldson was a legendary jazz artist who helped A-Jazz a lot. He put my mother on his album cover, good friends with my father. But my father boycotted and picketed Lou Donaldson because Lou Donaldson played Sun City. He went and played in South Africa. And he said, oh, I know Elambe good. They ain't gonna picket and boycott me. Surprise. Oh, you know better than that. This is about principle. You know what I mean? So Lou Donaldson then later came back and did a free concert and apologized about, you know, playing South Africa and being in, you know, involvement in that. So, you know, it's sometimes.
Don't forget, he went after Muhammad Ali.
Oh yeah, he definitely went after Ali about that. Yeah, because Ali at the time, the great Ali, anybody who gets the book Ali by Jonathan Ng, you know, you can see the poem. As I said, my father was also, you know, with the spoken word. He did an open letter, but it had a poem in there, a rhyming poem to Ali, because Ali at the time was not, if you remember, Ali got his consciousness from Malcolm, you know, and Ali was saying, he kept using the adjective black in a negative way. You know, you black, ugly, this about his opponents. And my father was like, we the leaders of the Black is Beautiful movement. You're not, A-Jazz, you know, you're not doing that, you know, my father was still known as Cecil Brathwaite, and he wrote this open letter in the Chicago Defender. Chicago Defender had the highest circulation of all the papers at the time in the United States for Black readers. So Ali really took it like a gut punch, like, oh, you know, they eventually squashed the beef per se and everything like that. But and Ali brought him and my uncle over to Zaire to see the fight. But my father really didn't take too kind to Ali using the word black as a pejorative when, you know, teasing and poking fun of other Black boxers. Like, no, we're not doing that. You know, black don't go with ugly, black don't go with stupid, these sort of things. No. So anybody who gets Jonathan Ng's book could read the whole situation, you know, and, you know, Ali would come to respect his sort of boldness from that, because, you know, Ali wasn't the champ even at that time, you know. Father was like, yeah, you know, you're a good young fighter, but, you know, this brother you're talking about, he the standard, he the champ, you know, he's the standard bearer, you know. There's nothing about his features that are ugly, whether it's his nose size, any of that, none of his physiognomy or the look of Black, nothing about that is ugly, and Black is beautiful. So like, yo, change up your speech when you're addressing these brothers. You know, the Black is not a pejorative term. So yeah, so he addressed that, you know. But I think
he was Cassius Clay at the time.
Huh?
He was Cassius Clay at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the things that my father did, help my father when they thought my father used to work for Like It Is. And he used to also, he was a consultant. He was a graphic artist for them. And he did the international affairs. So when you see some of these African heads of state, or even some of the Caribbean heads of state, a Maurice Bishop of Grenada on there, they was on there because my father said, Gil, I need you to have this brother on here. This is what he represent. This is what he about. We need to let our people know here who Maurice Bishop is, who Robert Mugabe is, who Sam Nyoma is. These people, you know what I mean? So, and that was going on. But what got him off was when they were doing a show about the war with Israel and the Palestinians. And what happened, there were some people of the Jewish faith, and Like It Is, or ABC Channel 7 at the time, who were cameramen, and they seeing this, and they sort of put out to their community. These are people who are, it's not so much that they was Jewish, but it was the fact that they were there's a term called Zionism. And Zionism says that we are the chosen people, that, everybody, basically, if you understand what Zionism is, other groups are inferior, and we are the chosen ones. And so whatever conflicts we have, that's destined, ordained sort of thing by our group. And, it's caused a lot of issues. So they were doing a show. It wasn't directly dealing with the Black community, but that was the show that the cameramen and the people behind it put out to their network. This is hitting home, for Israel. And so that's when, if you see the book, it talk about, that's when the State Department got involved. But I just want to make it clear, not every person of the Jewish faith supports or believes in Zionism. There's a lot about Zionism as racism, is a form of racism, that it's about more than upholding their identity as of the people of the Jewish faith. But it's really something that is, because identified with people who are European Jews, right? There are people who come from Ethiopia, right? And they have they've been identified as Jewish way before there was a state of Israel. Let's just put it that way. So it's not just, it wouldn't, many times you find those groups don't identify with Zionism, but, basically, it's about more than statehood for people, because if it was just about statehood, then it wouldn't be controversial. It's the behaviors that come out of Zionism, in terms of, you see what's happening with the Palestinians and how they come in that area. They keep moving, extending this settled state, taking more and more away from Palestinian people. Palestinian people don't have an army that can compete with Israel's. Israel, of course, financed by the United States, billions of dollars. They got all of the latest this or that. So, it's basically been crushing Palestinian people for a long, long time. And, we know that this same group identified and supported apartheid in South Africa. So it's a no-brainer, whose side, if there's a question of the struggle for Palestinian rights and the struggle against Zionism, that it's all about the Palestinian people and their rights to self-determination all day, every day. Make no mistake about that. So, but doing a show dealing with that is when ABC like, okay, no, Ilambe, you can't be on the show. You can't do no consulting on here no more. You can't work here. We're gonna move you to graphics engineer for another group and Monday Night Football and all this other stuff. But what it did is it freed my father up with more time to deal with a lot of stuff internationally. So, in a lot of ways, it helped him because then he was taking on the graveyard shift. They wanted to separate him and Gil Noble, you know, and the sort of programming that would take place without my father there. But it allowed him to do a lot of work with a lot of heads of state. I mean, look, we already know they was listening on the phone. When the phone bill at that time was in cell phones, you know, everybody had basically a landline. And so one time the phone bill had gotten up to $1,300, right? And so my bill ain't know, they turned off the phone. First of all, they turned off the phone. Your phone bill usually can't even get that high. But basically, we already know the CIA told the phone company, turn that darn phone back on. We need to listen in on what's going on. So we never paid the bill. They just turned the phone back on. So that's like, okay, that's really, you know, but sometimes it takes something to happen before it's that bell goes off. Like, you know, but there was no internet. You had to be on the phone at that time because you're talking internationally to these, you know, CIA just had to listen, and you know, of course, then the CIA gonna pass off stuff. So you just had to be very careful about how much you conveyed on the phone. You might try to, you know, they was intercepting it, you know. They was kind of like, you know, they was a step ahead. They was disseminating, you know. But you know, we know about COINTELPRO. We know about COINTELPRO. Right. We know how it's used to destroy movements all across the United States.
Yeah. Now, I don't have a dictionary close that I can put my hand on. A dictionary.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can you give me the definition of encyclopedia? You know the definition of encyclopedia?
Well, yeah, I know the different definition of encyclopedia. You want me to just say what it is? I think everybody sort of knows.
Go ahead, say what it is.
Okay, so encyclopedia is a book used. I'm sorry, you gotta remember. Unfortunately, I'm on the phone, so a lot of these messages are coming up. They just trying to prep me for something upcoming. But encyclopedia is a document that compiles and saves history, gives it proper meaning. It also serves as a database for comprehension for what it is, and also oftentimes pronunciation of words and origins of terms. So that's what, you know, encyclopedia basically offered us, and it was critical for people to have encyclopedias in their home back in the day.
Well, because the way I feel right now, I feel like I am speaking to an encyclopedia right now.
Well, I tell you, Rick, it's not me. All I'm really doing is conveying my father's work. I'm not trying to take credit for this. After all, I wasn't doing nothing so revolutionary that they come to my job and tell the powers that be, you know, you can't be on it. You can't be involved with this no more because your role in here is getting this out to too many people. You're helping change and shift the consciousness of minds through TV. You already got a radio show, Africa Kaleidoscope, you know, where you're, you know, so you on the back end in TV, you in radio, you writing in all of these papers, you know, you got your forums that you're doing on Friday night where you're bringing in all sorts of people, not only from Africa, but, you know, people in the United States. There's the brother, he wrote a book called Negroes with Guns. You know who this brother is who wrote Negroes with Guns?
No.
His name is Robin Williams. You know, he was a stalwart from the civil rights era. You know, he was a very well known. He was advocating, you know, for all of us to basically be armed up before, you know, after the Panthers came in. Robert Williams really got a lot of attention after that because in 1962 he came out with that book. You know, he helped inspire a lot of Panthers himself. Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party said all of them read that book when they were in college. You know, so Robert, I mean, Yeah, Robert Williams, he coming to the Harriet Tubman School. You know what I mean? Just so many people, you know, Queen Mother Moore, she got a place to, you know, speak. Because, you know, the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, what it did in terms of the community, they were the segue from the street speaking, you know, where notable people, you know, you hearing what's happening in our community, not just Harlem, even though Harlem was the nexus for the world at the time, but you got people from other states and more so internationally who were coming in on those Friday nights, you know, with agendas about what they were doing. You know what I mean? Then you had other people, even the vendors were revolutionary. You had people like Dr. Jack Felder, who was first coming to those, and he was telling people about acquired immune deficiency syndrome and how he believed it was germ warfare on us, and documenting its first origins in New York City and this sort of thing. So it was a place where people were hearing information, even from vendors who are not even technically not part of the program, but just on the scene coming, you know. So it was so much, you know, it was so much happening. And then, of course, as I said, my father's role with December 12th, I named all of the co-founders except the great Catholic preacher, Dr. Father Lawrence Lucas, who was also one of the co-founders. You know, Father Lucas, the brother, used to walk around as a heralded member of the Catholic Church. Father Lucas had a gun on his hip. You know, Father Lawrence Lucas. You know, he was a controversial Catholic preacher, but we love Father Lawrence Lucas. You know, and you know, he was with my father in Haiti. You know, I mean, Aristide and that whole situation. Africa Kaleidoscope was the place where people were going to hear what was going on, how the United States, what their role was in that. So it's you know, they were great, and they really got organized where they took this over the subway system after the death of Yusef Hawkins and everything. I don't know if you saw the HBO movie about Yusef Hawkins, but that's when they really got galvanized, you know. So, and you know, in the last organization my father co-founded, which is WADU, they were more so like an intellectual group of historians and people like that. WADU still is for World African Diaspora Union. They still exist. Professor Leonard Jeffries a part of that. A lot of good, you know, intellectuals, you know, part of WADU. You know, they still meet. But you know, personally, my favorite WADU member is a brother by the name of Dudley Thompson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica. Was a lawyer. He was Malcolm's lawyer also. He's the lawyer for the Mau Mau, you know, the revolutionary group. You know, these men. I mean, Dudley Thompson written more than one book, but he was a statesman. He lived about 98, and he's known on more than one continent. Wow. So, you know, wow. just in closing, I want to just put his name out there, you know, Dudley Thompson, and his role. But you know, this was why I do a world app. You know, a group of Pan-Africanist scholars, for the most part, you know, setting an agenda for Pan-Africanism, African internationalism, also, which is a different theory that comes out under my father's work with the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, where you get in people of African descent in other countries in Latin America. You know, a lot of people don't realize how we got millions of people in Brazil, African people in Brazil, millions in Colombia, millions in Argentina, all of these places. When people start to travel, they like, oh, I didn't know it was so many, you know, Black people here. You know, we're everywhere. We are the fathers and mothers of civilization. So, you know, yeah, so, you know, WADU, Yeah, yeah. You know, those are just some of the names, you know. I mean, if you go to Wadu's site, they still have my father on there as the vice president, Bobby Lambe Brath. You know, but yeah, so these are that's some of his work, that's some of his that he put down, founding these four organizations, his work with seeing colonialism wiped off, the yoke of colonialism left out in Africa. In fact, I've been in Africa for inaugurations where Namibia, when they got freedom, the most recent president was like, you know, Lambe Brath, a seat for him is reserved here for our, you know, for he'd been at all their inaugurations, and you know his passion, you know, he's not just speaking to African people in the Caribbean and in these places, he's speaking to African people in the motherland, you know, and they were very appreciative of it. And you know, that's another,
But
you know,
I
the
don't think
African
he passed.
internationalism.
I don't think he passed. I think he just transitioned, but his work is still going.
Yeah, his work is still going. And one of the things our foundation, as you see here, the logo, Lambe Brath Foundation, we're doing, we're trying to keep his work alive. We're trying to digitize a lot of his speeches and video, make them available to this new generation. In fact, I'm got to get off now because I'm on the board of another organization, and that's what
Right.
they do.
Okay.
They digitize all of the, you know, there was a lot that, you know, happened during the 60s and 70s. We can't lose that stuff to reel or Betamax or VHS. It has to be digitized and moved over to other
Right.
formats so the youth and young people for tomorrow can see it. So I gotta
Got it.
get ready for that call, and that's another. It's called upamainc.org. We're a nonprofit, and that's one of the things we do. We raise money through speakers so we can make sure. I remember when you just came on, we talked about Doug Frazier's Legend at the Hoop. Somebody probably got some video of that. We want all that sort of stuff. We don't like stuff getting lost to generations and technology. We want to digitize and make all of this stuff available. Not really so much in basketball, but I'm just giving an example from basketball. We talk about in politics and all of this sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there that happened, and we don't want it lost. So I'd like to thank your audiences for listening to me, and I think we covered a lot. We covered a lot.
Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the classroom session. Thank you for the lessons today. Outstanding.
Thank you. And when they ask what's in my hand, something as simple as a pen, because I'm about documenting and keeping legacies alive and history alive. So what's in my hand is a pen to document. The pen is mightier than the sword. Anybody who doesn't realize that, they missing out. So thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
And